Oh, it's not hard to grow skeptical of government in this modern era, as failures of state are the thrust of so many political and cultural stories. Take Ukraine. While the country needs stability, authoritarian Russia will use its military and political might to squash upcoming elections so the country can't be westerly swayed. In Nigeria, a corrupt government ineptly fumbles through protests and fear and can't seem to find over 300 kidnapped girls whose families are desperate for their safe return. And here, pretty much any agency that starts with 3 letters has become a cesspool of corruption, greed, and inefficiency. The IRS paid workers bonuses who've gotten into tax trouble, and the EPA rewarded workers who wasted hours of government time and money watching porn. You're right to be skeptical, but we will still find a way to turn you into an optimist. It's not all bad news. It's the independents. Hi there, and welcome Humpty Hump Day. I'm Kennedy, your hostess, along with Reason Magazine editor-in-chief Matt Welch and Camille Foster from Free Think Media. Together we are freely bound into this glorious union. Together we are the independents. Well, first it was the IRS giving millions of dollars in bonuses to irresponsible employees, and the BLM sending its own stormtroopers to handle a land dispute, and now the EPA is the corrupt government body of the moment. The House Oversight Committee has had its hands full lately, not just with that sassy Lois Lerner, but with the EPA. The agency's Special Homeland Security Unit has been blocking an inspector general's investigation because people there are having too much damn fun. One guy had been looking at porn for 2 to 6 hours a day by his own admission and had been given special awards. He had 7,000 filth files on his government computer, which apparently is enough to get you noticed. Yeah, he was singled out for his stellar performance.
So this guy's making $120,000. Spending 2 to 6 hours a day looking at porno. Information I have is he received performance awards during the time period.
Yes, he did receive performance awards.
Oh, yeah, and not just from the EPA. Huh? So they got rid of him, right? No, that would be too sadistic. They let him flourish.
This individual spent 4 consecutive hours on a site called Sadism is Beautiful. You are running an organization in which nobody can be fired.
Well, I guess it's better than being anti-sadist. Yeah, the testimony is mostly centered around a mysterious pseudo-spy named John Beale, who's accused of bilking the EPA out of around $900,000 in compensation payments. He was kind of busy for a few years. He didn't report to work because he told his bosses he was off working for the CIA. For 2.5 years. Well done, Beale. Let's run this all by our party panel and see if it passes the sniff test tonight. We've got Fox News contributor Jehmu Greene and Red Eye co-host Andy Levy. So, why are we here? Why aren't we working for the EPA?
I have no idea.
Awesome.
The EPA's Homeland Security Unit. What does the EPA's Homeland Security Unit do?
They're protecting the environment from homeland disasters securely.
It's actually one of these Inspector General thingies that we've been talking about all week on this show with Representative Chris Stewart and Thomas Massey, that they have police forces and all these regulatory agencies, and it's crazy. I just love the fact that all you have to do is say Homeland Security or intelligence, and apparently you can do anything in the United States government. You don't have to show up for work and all this kind of stuff. Daryl Issa is very right about one thing. This highlights a discrepancy between people who work for the federal government and all the rest of us. They really can't get fired. They make about the same amount of money as we do if you compare apples to apples with jobs, but they make a way more in compensation and pension and health care. And unlike the rest of us, they just can't get fired. It's astonishing, and it shows the difficulty of reforming bureaucracies.
Also get pretty much locked in raises, like year over year over year. Don't necessarily always get that in other gigs.
How's your locked in
productivity?
raise
It hasn't happened in some time, actually. Your productivity actually matters. It affects your salary. This guy, he was pursuing his passion at the office and was apparently rewarded for that.
Porno boy or the secret spy?
The gentleman who was very, very determined to look at and to focus on his pornography. If nothing else, this is another indication that perhaps government is a little too big, that maybe these folks don't have enough to do.
And bad at self-policing. Hi, Jehmu.
Hello.
You're smiling. So you think this is a great idea? Yay, EPA, go! No!
Before I came, I was reading Business Insider's How to Watch Porn at Work and Get Away with It.
Yeah. Apparently so is this man.
He missed that article.
He did miss it
apparently.
because he didn't get away with it. Come on.
But
these
still
are
has a job.
These are
And bonuses.
crazy
And awards.
and rare occurrences. This is not an indication that government is too big.
Is it crazy and rare?
3% of workers watch porn every single day, whether you're in the government or the private sector. He should be fired. They should be fired. They should have to walk down the street in a shame parade. But we cannot let this override all of the great work that the EPA does. Keep me alive from my asthma attacks.
But the issue is certainly that this guy cannot
was,
and has not been fired, right? That's the issue in this particular circumstance.
He should be fired,
Right.
and whatever needs to happen to make that happen should happen immediately.
Okay.
But then saying government is too big and government is bad, without the EPA, there'd be more premature deaths. There'd be hundreds of thousands of more asthma attacks. We would not be able to stop cancer or slow down cancer in the way that
Really,
we
without
have.
the EPA?
What about-
I'm actually
without the
very
EPA's
confident that we would be. I mean, ask
Clean
any
Air Act,
oncologist in the country if they need the EPA to do their jobs and to do their research.
Through the Clean Air
That's
Act,
crazy talk.
Through the mercury
I totally
ruling
love you and
that
you
just
look
came
beautiful,
down
but that's
last
Nutty
week.
Bird McGillicuddy.
These people are doing good work.
I don't want to be
Please save me from
contrarian
myself.
here, but I think one could argue that if you can watch porn for 6 hours a day, you deserve some kind of reward.
That's true.
Also, I mean, better that they're screwing themselves than screwing us. And, looking at porn at work is stupid. I don't have a problem with people taking breaks at work. I think it leads to more productivity. Play solitaire, play Minesweeper, surf the net, whatever. But looking at porn is just stupid, especially downloading it at work. At least get it at home, put it on a USB stick, and bring it in. I mean, be smarter.
No, I like
That's
that.
all I want.
You need to write a helpful hint book for EPA workers. And they should have checked with the CIA to see, hey, is John Beale really a spy? No, he's not? Oh, great. Okay, we'll stop paying him $1 million. All right, so, yes.
No, I just think you're, and it surprises me coming from you people. You're all people. You're all sheep for not questioning the CIA's denial that this guy was working for them. That's exactly what they would say if he was working for them.
Him and Chuck Barris, good point.
That's true.
All right, so why should Eric Holder have all the fun when it comes to drones? Imagine how informed the press and the world would be if journalists were also allowed to use unmanned aircraft to gather information. The endless possibilities of deployment, just think about it. Over 12 news organizations are fighting the government to lift the ban on journalist drones. Is this a violation of the Constitution? Should the press be allowed to let their freak birds fly over protests and fires and war zones to gather information?
Sure, they should, and the U.S. government will drag, and the FAA will drag their feet in doing this because they want to have monopolist drone airspace, not just in the United States but in the world. What they're going to find is that the entire world is going to have drones within 10 years,
right?
And the whole private sector is going to want to have drones too. 95% of drones that are up right now are surveillance drones. That's the best usage of their technology, not necessarily blowing up Yemeni's, wedding guests.
Well, the challenge for the regulators is they have to try to keep up with the technology, and this interestingly dovetails nicely with the topic we just talked about. The question is, what are drones good for? Who will be using them, and under what circumstances and context? And the question is also, where are the rules going to come from? Is it going to be top down? Is it going to be some blanket rule from the FAA that says no one can fly drones, or will companies, private organizations, private persons be able to use them for legitimate purposes?
They're supposed to
like
have
this?
commercial rollout by 2016, I think.
Yeah, I think ultimately, I think the news orgs will prevail on this, and I think what will happen is the FAA will they'll come up with a list of regulations that everyone finds amenable or whatever. I don't think news drones should be regulated at all, because then I think what could happen is news organizations could start mounting little guns on them, and then you shoot down your competitors' drones, so you get exclusives.
That's well, you know what?
That
It's
is
not a bad
destruction
idea.
of
I mean,
property.
that's
I think you get in
competition
trouble
right there.
for that.
So what could they use drones for?
Well, what could I use drones for? If you're dating me, my drone will follow you. It will also have
That's nice.
weaponry on it just in case something goes on that I don't approve of. I want my own drone. News organizations should have theirs as well.
Right? Isn't that a total violation of the First Amendment?
Yes.
It's something.
Let's get the Indies drone. Let's do it.
Yes, we should. We should have the Independence drone.
Yeah.
Where would we send it? I would
Rick
just.
Santorum's house.
Oh, Rick Santorum, I'm coming for you, buddy. All right, well, our panel will be back. Thank you very much, both of you. Andy Levy, you will be back. Jehmu, thank you very much for being here. And we're going to get a refresher course on Ukraine. And Charlamagne, the God, is here in the flesh. It's so good it hurts. It's the Independence. welcome back. What's going on in the Ukraine? I can't say the anymore. Are they on the hunt for stability and a new pro-Western government, or is the provisional government really just a junta, as Russia claims? The irascible regional superpower won't give up the ghost in Crimea. So what is the world to do? Let's get some answers on this Eastern European hot pot from Michael Weiss. He's the editor-in-chief at The Interpreter, and he returns to The Independent to discuss elections, retribution, and a possible international solution. Welcome back, Michael.
Thanks for having me.
So what's going on there right now? I mean, there might be elections in a few weeks.
Yeah. Well, so the interesting news today is Putin came out and said the eastern regions that have been sort of under various control by separatist groups, although it kind of goes back and forth, should not hold a referendum on independence or possible, future incorporation to the Russian Federation, which was scheduled to take place in 4 days from now. And I mean, look, it couldn't have happened if they wanted to, because unlike Crimea, which had a sizable Russian conventional military presence to oversee the so-called referendum.
How lucky.
Yeah, they don't have that in the East. And in fact, a lot of these cities are changing hands with, the passage of hours and days. I mean, Mariupol, the Ukrainian authorities came in, booted the separatists out. Then when the authorities withdrew, the separatists came back in and hoisted the Russian flag where a Ukrainian one had once.
Yeah.
So there's this, basically, we're talking about a civil war happening right now, a low-intensity civil war in eastern Ukraine right now.
Yeah, I would call it that. I mean, these things are sort of done in a kind of postmodern or specialized way these days. I mean, it's not a conventional civil war. The Ukrainians are using Interior Ministry troops, special forces, and indeed their military.
And Ukrainian billionaires.
Well, that too. And Russia is using, I think there is now overwhelming and irrefutable evidence that Russian intelligence officers and special forces are on the ground. For instance, the separatists have been able to down Ukrainian helicopters with surface-to-air missiles. Now, these are the things that are quite hard to get a hold of for Syrian rebels. Yeah. So for Russian separatists or pro-Russian separatists to do so in the East suggests that they're being shipped in from Russia by agents of the Putin government.
Michael, what does the best evidence suggest for how long Russia has actually been there helping to orchestrate things behind the scene with the separatists? And
well, there have been sort of bits and bobs of evidence, but all of it quote unquote alleged. The most interesting to me is the head of the self-defense militias in Donetsk, a man called Igor Strelkov. Strelknov, sorry. This guy is, he's quite this sort of chatterbox on Russian chat forums, and has basically outed himself as an agent of Russian intelligence. And he's running around declaring that he's sort of in charge of the separatist armed campaign in Donetsk. The guy's a Russian national.
I guess the loudest guy wins, right?
Yeah, well, pretty much. And I mean, I think today the head of the People's Republic of Donbass, what is he called, the military commander, said that I'm not a pro-Russian Ukrainian, I'm a Russian. I'm from Sochi. So they're actually kind of wearing the plumage of their own sort of occupation of this region. And this, again, it just suggests that Putin is more confident about, the fact that he has his paw prints all over.
Where do you see this going? I mean, what happens? Does Russia exhaust itself? Does this international federalization plan take hold? What happens to the country in the short run and in the long run?
Look, it's a good question. I mean, I was in Eastern Europe, including in Kiev in the last 2 weeks. And various officials I was talking to, foreign ministers of Eastern European governments, said, we don't think Putin has actually made up his mind as to what he wants to do. Will he invade Ukraine, or mainland Ukraine, using conventional military forces? Or is his game just, to play at this political destabilization? Well, now there seems to be evidence that his original plan of using these proxies and trying to forestall national presidential elections, which are scheduled for May 25th, has failed. Putin himself has come out, in addition to saying no referendum for the separatists, yes, we should have Ukrainian elections, which is interesting. So what does this mean? Does this mean he's hoping that the East simply won't be able to hold them because it's too restive? And if that's the case, what follows from that? He said today also, and this was sort of taken at face value by a number of media organs that should know better, that Russia has withdrawn its troops from the borders of Ukraine. NATO and the U.S. has categorically denied this and said that we see no evidence to suggest they're pulling back. So he still has options. I mean, he still could very well go to war with Ukraine.
Wow, it's so crazy, and an unfolding situation day after day. Thank you very much for being
my pleasure.
here. We'll talk to you again.
Yeah, thank you.
Because you know what's going to change. Coming up, we got Charlamagne the God, and Andy Levy returns. You got to stay with us. Right there. Welcome back to The Independence. Another anchor here at Fox who you may know. He operates what he calls the no spin zone, perhaps stealing part of his catchphrase at Kansas City Children's Hospital. They thought it had a nice ring to it, and they have reportedly established what they call a no-hit zone. Children's Mercy Hospital in KC has banned the hitting of any kind, including parents spanking their kids. Do we need a no-hit zone? Is this overkill?
I'm not sure.
I know you're a big fan of spanking.
I hate spanking, and I do not practice it, and I discourage other people from doing so, although it's not necessarily my business. I think if you have a size and a reach advantage and a power and an intellectual advantage over a kid, you can express authority without resorting to your size advantage. My golly. But yeah, I mean, the thing that bothers me here is that they're going to report you to child services. So I don't like spanking, but I also don't like, criminalizing parenthood or getting government people between you and your child based on, how big the mark is on your buttock. It sounds a little bit possibly overreaching
As if parents need another reason to fear taking their kids.
I almost want to steal the ball and throw it back at you, Kennedy, because you have kids and I don't yet. At some point, one day, probably.
Yeah.
But do you?
What?
I'm sorry, he said yet.
Spankings.
Yeah.
Do you deal those out to your children?
No, we're
Would
not.
you ever?
No, we're not a spanking household. We both firmly agree that there are other ways of handling conflict, and when you hit children, it sort of teaches them that hitting people is a good way to resolve things.
I think my wife and I have a bit of a house divided on the matter. I am firmly in favor of the non-aggression axiom.
Yeah.
She says if they get out of line, perhaps.
I know a lot of parents. I mean, I've got one friend who's got a lot of kids, and I asked her, how do you kind of keep everyone in line? Your kids are so well behaved. She said, spanking.
Children's rights is kind of a weird, interesting area for libertarians.
It's squishy. It's really hard to say.
It's a bit of a gray area in what the state's role should be in helping to police and protect children from their parents. There are certainly cases where parents can be abusive to children, and trying to find the right balance of the state's intervention into people's personal lives in that particular area is somewhat troubling and difficult. I think one way to fix that, however, is public schools, for example, introduce a whole new area for schools and parents and government to interact with one another. And I suspect that we can probably find better ways to educate kids than that.
I know, but there's still school districts where spanking is allowed, which is so crazy to me. The fact that a teacher can lay hands on children, I would run them over with a truck. I totally mean that as a compliment. All right, well, call me skeptical of this study, but according to the Save the Children State of the World's Mothers report, America ranks 31st on the list of best places worldwide to be a mom. Of course, Finland, Norway, and Sweden take numbers 1 through 4. That's no surprise. And there we are at 31. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous. This is such a skewed survey. And what is the flawed criteria they're using? Because I got to tell you, of all the places you could raise kids, the United States is pretty awesome. You have access to all sorts of things here, including a lot of open land and great strollers and technology, which, even from the time I had my first child, which was 2005, the technological increase is geometric, if not exponential.
Well, they do measure gross national income per capita as part of this, which I think is appropriate because if you're richer, you can do more things. And if you're less poor, you can do more things. But one of the criteria is participation of women in national politics. What does that have to do with motherhood exactly? It's easy to throw cold water on the new study proves it a line of journalism here, and we should in this case too. But there is comparative difficulties I think for American mothers here. Childcare is super expensive and not particularly easy to get, as you well know, and I know as well. If you have a kid who's 3 years old or 2 years old and you want to work, you're going to be shelling out 14, 15 grand a year if you don't have family nearby, which a lot of us don't necessarily have family nearby. And so even though they go with a lot of sort of socialistic and very Budinsky-esque and 3-year maternity leaves, which I don't think will ever really make sense in an American context, at the same time, a lot of young mothers have less stress in some Western European countries than they do here because of that.
Yeah, but they would have fewer employment opportunities.
That is also
if
true.
They took months and months and months of maternity.
That becomes the fundamental problem with all of these ranking systems. It is a moment in time, a single data point, and it's certainly certainly doesn't tell you if you have a very generous social safety net, and the consequences of that are that you get into debt trouble, and 10 years later you end up having some sort of debt crisis. That isn't factored into this study at all. That doesn't come into play, and I think that's at least one important detail.
France has a more generous social safety net for kids. They also give parents or prospective parents money to breed and all that kind of stuff. But French people are fleeing France in droves because of their welfare state is not working. They can't pay for it anymore.
Well,
the economy is terrible. So
I know people don't like to talk about this, but one of the ways you can get less expensive childcare is if you open up your borders to allow more immigration.
Sure.
And that may not be popular, but also, I mean, this takes some of the power away from women by saying that women have to be reliant on government, and somehow they become victims when they have children. When I have found, and I know a lot of the moms I know, that when you have children, it gives you a whole new source of power and insight and inspiration to do right by yourself and your kids and to have a complete family. And, there's no magical solution, but this kind of stuff is nonsense. Charlamagne the God, he will be talking no nonsense. He's going to tell us how to live and how he would rule the earth. And coming up, one man flies the bird to the cops and gets a pass. Harry Reid is an obsessed fanboy and the humblest prince in the whole world. OMG. It's the Topical Storm next. When you have a thirst for news, let us pour stories into your face like a bad scene out of Coyote Ugly. This is the Topical Storm. Topic number one, Prince William is just so humble and wonderful. First, he marries a commoner who births a beautifully chubby baby, and now we're learning he's a down-to-earth lad to boot. Can he do no wrong? The Duke of Cambridge should have a gilded Learjet to fly him from photo op to charity stop. But when the sensible millennial had to catch a flight from Memphis to Dallas to hitch a ride back to jolly old England, how you going? There were no seats left in first class. I know, this is the worst accent ever.
It's Australian.
Don't start. And since rich people are selfish and rarely starstruck, His Highness had to fit his hiney into a coach seat with the dirt people on an American Airlines flight. He's just so real. I have to admit, full disclosure, I would totally eat his delicious baby. I love Prince George.
That's super weird.
Have you seen how chubby that kid is?
It's a cute kid.
Cute.
It's like a puddle jump flight. Standing over for a guy who sits with the common people.
Yes.
Just wants.
Yeah.
The only thing that keeps me is if either one of you were royalty, you would never fly coach. I just know this.
That's true. I barely fly coach now.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't clear the upgrade list, unfortunately. But the guy was catching a connecting flight in Dallas, and I'm confident his flight from Dallas to the UK, first class.
I bet it was triple first class.
Yeah.
I bet it was the kind of first class where you get like a neck rub.
Those are the best kind.
Keeping it clean. Come on now. Topic number two. Harry Reid is like a hormonal 8th grader when it comes to the Koch brothers. He pretends like he thinks they're super icky, but Charles and David better watch out because Nevada's curmudgeonly senator has such a man crush, he might just stick gum in their hair and kiss them on the mouth when they turn around. What else could explain all these weird tweets other than half-ashamed lust? Tweet number one. Oh, Harry. I agree with the Kochs that they are not experts on climate change and that climate change should be based on sound science. Tweet number two. Well, the Koch brothers admit they're not experts on climate change. They're experts in causing it. Tweet number three. Kochs are waging war against protecting the environment. Meanwhile, they're one of the most toxic air polluters. He also said on the Senate floor that the Kochs are, quote, one of the main causes of climate change. He doesn't need any science to back that up. Don't look now, Harry, but I think your read is pointed straight at the Kochs. Harry's got some boyfriends.
He also blamed them for the crisis in the Ukraine, if you recall correctly. When Democrats lose the Senate in November, which will be a joyous occasion for many people, I hope they look back at what Harry Reid spent the last 10 months doing, which is not even in that good voice that you use. It's just, the Koch brothers admit that they don't know anything about climate. I mean, he's this boring, droning,
he's
like
deflated old man Winter.
Exactly. It's totally disreputable for a human being to behave that way, let alone someone who's supposed to be in a position of leadership.
There's also very little evidence that this kind of scaremongering is actually working. Most people do not know who the Koch brothers are. For all of their wealth and business success, they just don't register, they don't rate. And I've noticed that Republicans recently have been going after George Soros and the various Democrats going to meet him to ask for money in exactly the same way. I don't know that that's going to rate particularly highly either.
No one
This
cares.
doesn't seem to work. No one cares.
Soros is a total polluter.
Yeah.
He spews carbon like he means it. Topic number 3. You can call this a big win for free speech in the Granite State. The state Supreme Court in New Hampshire ruled unanimously to let David Montenegro keep his vanity plate that says, "Cops lie." Montenegro says he's fighting government corruption in his own little way. In New Hampshire, you cannot have a plate that, quote, "a reasonable person would find offensive to good taste." Lawyers argued that the law is unconstitutionally vague and gives too much leeway to cranky DMV workers who've maybe had a bad day and want to wreck everyone's fun because no one likes the DMV. The justices sided unanimously with the bold plate because state law couldn't pinpoint what is offensive to good taste. I may not quite have the, nards to rock a brave plate like that, but hey, man, it's New Hampshire. Live free or die. Or hopefully cops won't lie.
This is like a positive development for free speech and all that razzmatazz. But if I can go Camille here for a half a second, we're like throwing a party celebrating the fact that we now can go to our government overlords and basically have them approve our wording on the brand that they put on our cars. So that's such a victory.
I like that. Initially there, I thought you were going to do the whole Allen Iverson. You're talking about practice routine.
Well, no, that's later.
That almost happened. All right, that's good. I like that. I don't have anything else to add to that.
No, Matt got all Camille-ified.
Yeah.
Well done.
It's good. We're radicalizing him. It's going to
Those
happen.
gentlemen getting along, big, sweet, and courageous. Topic number 4. How cool was your dad when you were a kid? What did he build you other than an ivory tower of resentment? One dad in California decided to indulge his kids who got super excited after a big roller coaster ride, and he built them their own coaster in their backyard. How awesome is that? It's made of PVC pipe on wood frame. You can see the car right there. He dove into the math and physics with his children so they could see the usefulness and everyday application of those subjects, and he blogged about it as the Coaster Dad Project. My only worry is something this cool and exciting is surely a magnet for government interference, and I worry some meddling municipality will make him dismantle the fun ride just to teach him the meaning of the word respect. So his kids won't only learn the laws of physics, they'll also become small government activists to boot. Well done, Dad.
We tried this over at Billy Kersey's dad's house when I was like 7 or 8 years old, and spent the entire day on like this cardboard sort of wooden thing and maybe some pipe or something like that. Spent hours, what I'm sure was 35 minutes or something like that.
Needless to say, it didn't work.
It went about 2 inches. That dad's awesome. Billy Kersey's dad was great too. Don't get me wrong, but
his name was Jerome, and he played for the Portland Trail Blazers.
true.
It's totally true. Have you heard of Charlamagne, the God? He's already a legend, and we're going to pull him into our studio and into your heart next.
It'll make you choke, you can't provoke, you can't cope, you should have broke because I ain't no joke.
Welcome back to The Independents. Our Friday show is all about if I ruled the world. And when I met Charlamagne, the God, the #1 R&B and hip-hop morning DJ in the country, he is the anchor of The Breakfast Club, I knew he was primed and ready to become leader of the free world, if not the globe. You can hear his voice every morning all across the country, not only here in New York, but everywhere in the world on iHeartRadio as well. You can see his face on Revolt TV. Welcome, Charlamagne.
Hey.
The God.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Kennedy.
It's so nice
What's up,
to
Matt,
see you in the studio.
Camille? How are y'all?
very good.
So, Charlamagne, first of all, how'd you get your name?
Charlamagne, well, I used to sell crack in Moncks Corner, South Carolina, and the town is like really, really small. It's population less than 8,000. So I never used to want to tell the fiends my real name because I know they'd be like, oh, that's Larry's son, because my name is Larry too. Leonard Larry, my father's name is Larry. So I used to always say my name was Charles. So it was something that stuck with me. I was like, hey, I'm Charles. Yeah, so come see Charles when you want to, come on the block, whatever. And then I was in night school one day reading a history book, and I read on Charlamagne which stood for, which was French for Charles the Great.
Yeah.
And Charlamagne was a Roman emperor who was over the Carolingian dynasty, and I'm from South Carolina, so the whole Carolingian.
It made sense, yeah.
Yeah, so it was just one of those things like, hey, I'm gonna start calling myself Charlamagne instead of Charles.
And it totally stuck.
It's totally stuck.
It's a great
Yeah.
When did the God become part of it?
Well, I used to study the 5% teachings of Islam.
Oh.
You know, and you know, God is a Greek word derived from the Aramaic words Guma al-Dabar, which means wisdom, strength, and beauty. And the first letter of each word was used by Greek students in their identification of their all-wise ancient Egyptian masters. So when you know the history of yourself, you know that's our ancestry. So that was something I adopted, because Charlamagne is actually Charles the Great, but I just wanted to say Charlamagne the God, which actually makes no sense because it would be Charles the Great, the God. So, you know.
Are you a 5%er?
Nah, I don't claim any religion, you know, nothing. I'm just a spiritual person, you know. I just feel like religion causes confusion, you know, and I don't like when things get too religion-y for me. I know that's not a word, but I don't like
It is now.
having to participate in all the practices and praying this many times a day. I just have my relationship with my creator, and that's that.
And how did you become so successful? What was it? Was it an inner fire? Was it coming from a difficult place?
Yeah, man. My father used to always be telling me that, you know, if I didn't change my ways, you know, my criminal ways, because I was in and out of jail, he was like, if I don't change that, I'm going to end up in jail or dead or broke sitting under a tree in Moncks Corner, South Carolina. And, you know, as I started to see a lot of my older cousins who influenced me, that really started happening to them, you know, and a lot of my friends were dying and going to jail, and a lot of my older cousins were really broke sitting under the tree. So, you know, they say a smart man, you know, learns from his own mistakes, but a wise man learns from the mistakes of others. So in order to change my life, I changed my lifestyle. So instead of, you know, being in the streets and being in and out of jail, I just started working mad different jobs. Like I was working at like Taco Bell, I worked at a flower garden, a warehouse, just trying to create this positive energy around me, this constructive energy. And then I ended up meeting this guy named Willie Will, who was a radio personality in Charleston, South Carolina. And I just asked him, like, how'd you get in the radio? And he was like, I got an internship. And I was like, it's that easy?
Yeah.
Now, mind you, this is 1998.
Yeah.
You know, I'm 18 years old, so I go to the radio station and get an internship at the radio station.
That's exactly what I did as well. That's how I got into radio and broadcasting, was an internship in 1991.
Yeah, so I haven't looked back since.
And what would you do if you could rule the world? If you could make any decisions how human beings acted, how the world was run, what would the globe look like under Charlamagne the God, the ruler?
So this is like magic, like anything.
Magic, anything, yeah.
Not laws, magic.
You have to abide by like the laws of gravity and physics.
Okay.
Other than that, you can do what you want.
I think I would just erase prejudice, man. You know what I mean? I would want everybody to deal with equality. You know, how Martin Luther King Jr. said he wanted to live in a society where people are judged by not the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I think like I would want to expound on that and say people are judged, you know, not by the color of their skin or their sexuality or their religion or their gender or their class. We just all treat people as people. Like everybody's just dealing with equality on a real level.
You think
I think that's what I would change.
Closer to a world like that? I mean, it's been some time since MLK was here.
I think so. I think that if you look at a lot of these millennials, they view the world different, you know, and I think that they're growing up with a lot of things that are more normal to them, as opposed to it was taboo for us, like growing up in the 80s and 90s. Like I think that, especially with race, because they all grew up the same. They grew up listening to hip hop. Hip hop has been a great equalizer of people. Like they grew up listening to the same music. They grew up dressing alike. So I don't even think hip hop is like something you would call a black thing anymore. I think it's more of a sensibility than anything. And I think that they see each other in that way. Like they don't see black, they don't see white, they don't see gay, they don't see straight, they don't see Muslim, Christian. They just see people as people. I think we can learn a lot from the younger generation in that aspect.
I would like to learn more from you. Will you stick around and talk to us about Michael Jordan and NFL cheerleaders?
Yeah, that goes hand in hand. Really, Michael Jordan and NFL cheerleaders.
Right.
Yeah, I'm here.
Well, then it's a natural progression. Thank you,
Yes.
Charlamagne. All right, we'll be back in moments. We have a lot to cover with Andy Levy as well, including Michael Jordan's teenage racism, and we'll give some NFL cheerleaders our own jiggle test.
Oh, I like jiggles.
This is the Independence. I know you do. This is the Independence, Charlamagne the God and Andy Levy, the Levy. They have been placed side by side, just as the Lord intended.
Ebony and Ivory.
That's right. God, it's like an Oreo and a Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney song all in one.
Yes.
Getting very...
Segregation was abolished for us to be able to sit side by side.
Thank you, Oprah.
This is Martin Luther King's dream is all about.
That's right. It's very beautiful. Well, let's tackle some topics as we wipe the mist away from our eyeballs. Michael Jordan, his airness, and my sexy American boyfriend. He is the subject of a new book, Michael Jordan, The Life by Roland Lazenby. And he says he struggled with racism as a kid. He hated all white people, especially after he was suspended for throwing a soda at a girl who called him the N-word in school back in 1977. So does Jordan's confession help humanize this legend, or does it taint and confuse a racially charged NBA?
Why do you look at black guy first?
I think because generally I tend to have really strong opinions on stuff like this. In this particular case, though, I mean, this is a story about MJ then.
Yeah.
And MJ now, I would hope, is
and also little girls in 1977.
Little girls in 1977. I can imagine that, and particular, maybe in that moment, that has a profound effect on you and informs the way that you look at the world. But there is sort of an undercurrent, and maybe you could talk about this because we talked a little bit about this in the last segment. There's an undercurrent of animosity that I find even today amongst some black people towards white folks that is sometimes articulated and other times not.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is that fair to say?
I mean, I don't even know if it's fair for Michael Jordan to call himself a racist. I think that he was just hating someone who was hating him. I mean,
but he said all white people. He didn't just say the bitchy girl who threw soda or called him the N-word and he threw a soda at her.
But it was the 70s. Like, you know, racial tension was kind of still at an all-time high around that era. I mean, the Civil Rights Act was established in, what, 1964? So you're only like 10 years, you know, removed from that, right? So
and
it's like
busing everywhere.
Yeah. Of course you're going to hate white people at that time, and white people are going to hate you at that time.
I think you can hate
black people in 1977.
I wasn't around in 1977.
The Trailblazers won the world championship. Like
you can hate people that are actively doing bad things to you. That perhaps makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know if I would call that
applying
racism.
it to an entire group of people is another problem. Is another thing entirely.
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking during the break, if you don't mind my sharing, about voting for a presidential candidate, and you said you voted for a guy predominantly because of his race.
True.
That is
Barack Obama.
a racially motivated decision. We should be beyond stuff like that.
Well, if Hillary Clinton runs in 2016, I'm going to vote for her because she's a female.
Right.
So, you know, I'm
equal
opportunity ignorant
by gender.
Listen, I'm equal opportunity ignorant with my
first black president.
That's a great phrase, though.
I'm still racist.
Listen, I'm equal opportunity ignorant with my voting, okay?
But you also are a registered independent, Charlamagne.
That's right. Because one day I might want to vote for a Republican. It might be a Republican out there talking that talk.
Might be
and,
you.
know, connecting with me on a different level. I'll be like,
you might be the Mitt Romney of the next. Well, maybe.
If it gets me in the 1%, sure.
I want to hear if Andy's racist, though.
Well, that's a whole separate issue. We can talk about that during the break. There's nothing remarkable about a black teenager who deals with being called the N-word all the time, not having the greatest view of white people. I don't think that's racist. I don't think that it taints anything with the NBA. I don't get that at all. I think it's great that his mom was able to help him, he says, come to an understanding that not all white people were bad and that he shouldn't lump all white people together. But I think it's a rational feeling for him to have had as a teenager. I don't see any problem with it whatsoever.
And Michael Jordan is not racist. He's had sex with a lot of white women, okay? Isn't he married to a white woman now?
Yeah, he is. Juanita Jordan was not. She was not a whitey bird, but his current woman lady love who gave birth to his twins.
Yes, man. I just think
that could have been me, by the way.
Yes, you messed that up.
I'm not bitter.
You should be. You messed that up. You could have been Juanita Jordan before Juanita.
I totally could have been Juanita Jordan.
I could have been getting free Jordan for the rest of my life because I'm your friend. But no, you want to have morals and values and hold on to your virginity. Oh, God.
No, she just won the bet. That's all.
Oh.
Yeah. I did win the bet. Thank God. But that was the Lord's plan right there. It was not for me to be eviscerated.
I don't think so. I think the Lord's plan was for you to be producing us Michael Jordan Jr. and us be courtside at some basketball game right
now.
That could actually be really.
At the Bobcats?
Yes.
No, the Bobcats aren't in the playoffs anymore.
Well.
Or ever.
You people are such
I'm sure
haters.
he could score some tickets to the Heat Nets game.
Do you ever regret not having sex with Michael Jordan?
No, never. Not even ever. No, I wish. You know what? Honestly, if we're gonna be honest for just like 2 seconds, I totally wish I would have made out with him, just a little bit, but
just
not
to say
like.
You kissed Michael Jordan. Yeah, man.
I regret it a little.
You could have made out with Michael too?
Probably not.
Oh.
But I still regret it.
You on my behalf?
Yeah.
I appreciate that, Andy. That is a benevolent
I care.
phrase that you.
I have no
Thank
thoughts or feeling on the matter at all.
you. Okay, very good. Well, thank you, gentlemen, both very much. You made the show arousing and exciting.
Thanks for having us. That's the politically correct thing to say. I'm on Fox News. I want to be politically correct. Thanks for having us, Kennedy.
Charlamagne, will you come back?
If you have me.
No, I will.
I'm here.
Y'all
not mad that I said I would vote for Hillary or Barack, right?
No.
Oh, okay. What is the independent show?
Exactly.
I can't say that on O'Reilly show.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, he wouldn't want me to say
But
I
if you see Bill in the hall, give him a big hug and a smile.
Yes, and I'm not going on his show because I said I voted for Barack just because he's black. I will not be made a fool of on Bill O'Reilly's show.
I'm glad you took a stand.
We'll do that in the next segment after you're gone, though.
Well, speaking of unwanted pregnancies, how far have teen pregnancy rates plummeted? And with trollops like Miley Cyrus around, are the numbers on the rise? Find out next. Miley Cyrus. Well, she is the bane of many young girls' moms' existence. Like me, I hate having to explain things about Miley Cyrus. She has a good voice and catchy songs, but the way she liberally abuses substances and her tongue, she's totally a bad role model, right? With Miley and Rihanna and a host of other scantily clad naughty gals running around singing songs, surely young women see these images, shed their clothes, and hop into bed with any guy willing to indulge their hormones, right? No, teen pregnancy rates are in steep decline, which means girls are making better choices for their bodies and their futures. According to the Guttmacher Institute, rates for pregnancy and abortion have dropped to new lows. U.S. rates fell more than 50% across all ethnicities from 1990 to 2010. So what's causing the drop? With access to images and a push for legalized substances like marijuana, some hysterics would make a case that these things naturally lead to more babies, but it's not. So what gives?
Who knows what gives? And that's the great thing. I mean, we're making better choices. I think it's possible here to say that maybe things in pop culture, maybe video games that people play, all these kind of things, allow them to play act, to transgress without actually doing the thing, and allowing them to experiment without actually having to pay any consequences for it. It's a wonderful thing to remind ourselves every time there's a media scare about anything, whether it's entertainment or just violence in schools or anything. Things are actually getting a lot better.
Always be suspicious of sensational claims and outrages. We have these sort of frantic manias, but at the end of the day, there's much ruin in the nation. Probably going to be okay, ebb and flow, and things seem to be going in exactly the right direction with kids.
Yeah, and
I'm not afraid.
You know, and a lot of statistics and surveys of millennials, at least, bear this stuff out. And I am proud of you, young women. Go keep making those great choices, run companies, be doctors, and rule the world, just like Beyonce said. Well, I told you we would have some good news for you. People are capable of making better choices. Sometimes it makes it better to trust them than control them. Watch our Friday show, If I Ruled the World. Your plans